Welcome back to the exciting book of Genesis. What a wondrous book it has been. Today we find ourselves in chapter 49 again, part B. And okay, so Genesis 49, part B. We left off with the blessing of Yahudah, and so we're going to pick it up today with the blessing of Zebulun. So can I have my first reader read Genesis 49, 13 through 15, please?
Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Issachar is a strong donkey crouching down between two burdens. And he saw that the rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute.
Hallelujah. Okay, so Zebulun name means habitation or to dwell. And that's something that you'll see that's congruent with many other blessings of Yaakov. You know, they're kind of associated with his sons' names. And so here it is. We see Zebulun, that means dwelling or habitation, and he's speaking of Zebulun dwelling somewhere. You know, and he says that they shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Okay, now Zidon, or Zidon if you prefer, speaks to being a fishery or to catching fish. You know, and the word ships here is onia, number 591, meaning to be a ship or shipman. You know, and so here it is, we see a prophecy concerning Zebulun dwelling at the haven of the sea, or dwelling at the haven of the sea, and being for a haven or covering for ships or shipmen, if you prefer, and I kind of prefer shipmen. You know, so there to be a covering for the shipmen, and his border shall be unto Zidon. You know, unto the fishery. You know, and we're going to touch on this a little bit more later. But also we have the prophecy or blessing concerning Yissachar. And it says Yissachar is a strong behind, crouching between two burdens. Now, when I look at this word burden, it's mishpach in the Hebrew number 4942, which actually speaks to burdens or sheepfolds. And I found that particularly interesting. You know, especially seeing that the Most High once told me that my number is 9 and the ninth tribe is Yissachar. You know, Yissachar name speaks of recompensing or receiving a reward. And here we see the blessing is that they will be a strong behind, couching between two burdens or between two sheepfolds. You know, now, you know, prior to Yeshua's time, you know, two sheepfolds probably wouldn't have made much sense at all, you know, and so it wouldn't have never gotten translated as such, you know, but post Yeshua, it makes more sense. You know, when we consider Yochanan 10:16, which says, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." It makes all the sense in the world. You know, and so here it is, speaking of Yissachar couching down betwixt two sheepfolds, if you would, you know, and verse 15 goes on to say, "And he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and he bowed his shoulder to bear." You know, and so this is what beasts of burden do, you know. They bow their shoulders to take on their burden, you know, and became a servant unto tribute. You know, and so and I took it upon myself to look up the word tribute, and it's mas in the Hebrew, number 4522 in the Strong's, and it speaks to a burden as causing to faint. So yeah, it speaks of taking on a burden that's exhausting, an exhausting burden. Speaks to even like a tax in the form of forced labor. Where they work they work the crap out you until you're exhausted. But tribute also can speak to an act or statement or gift that is intended to show gratitude, respect, or admiration. And that's the way I choose to look at the burden that I've bowed my shoulder down to bear, as an act or statement or gift that is intended to show gratitude to my Elohim and respect or admiration for my Messiah, Yahushua. And even though it can be exhausting at times, it still is my pleasure. We also have Genesis 49:16 through 18. My next reader, please.
Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. I have waited for thy salvation, O Yahuwah.
Hallelujah. Okay, so here it is, this prophecy concerning Dan, and it speaks of Dan judging his people as one of the tribes of Israel. This word judge is Din, number 1777, meaning to rule, by implication, to judge, also meaning to strive or contend. So technically speaking, it can also speak to Dan striving or contending with his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And verse 17 said, Dan shall be a serpent by the way. Now, what way is being spoken of? Could it be the way of Elohim? I think so. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, and as we're going to see, Dan did become a serpent by the way of Elohim, an adder in the path, if you would, that biteth the horse's heel so that his rider fall backward. And then verse 18 tells us, I have waited for thy salvation, O Yahuwah. And actually that word salvation there is actually Yeshua, number 3444 in the Strong's. So it can just as easily say, I have waited for Yeshua, O Yahuwah. Now, speaking of Dan being a serpent by the way of Elohim, and an adder in the path of those that seek to follow Elohim, that causes the rider to fall backward. Let us consider, the idolatry that was set up in Dan. We read about it in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 26 through 30. It says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. And just as a little backdrop to the story, we have King Jeroboam. He just become king, because Solomon messed up. So Yah said he was going to rip the kingdom from him, but he saved a portion because of his servant David. So when his son Rehoboam, inherited the kingdom, he received some very sound advice from the elders of the kingdom. Yet he chose not to adhere to that sound advice of the elders, but rather the ill advice of his peers. And as a result, 10 tribes of Israel took Jeroboam and made him king. But it was ordained by Yah from the very beginning. Okay, now Jeroboam, after becoming king, this is where we pick up in verse 26 of 1 Kings 12. It says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. Now this right here, I just have to, get on Jeroboam just for a second. You know, and actually Jeroboam name means to contend with the people. You know. You know, and what I see here, you know, Jeroboam, you know, here it is, Yah sent his prophet unto him, told him that he was going to be king before he became king, and he actually become king. And once he become king, all due to the word of the Most High El, Yahuwah Elohim, then he gets worried about the kingdom returning to the house of David. And so he does something very foolish.
Yeah.
Verse 27 tells us, if this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of Yahuwah, Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Adonai, even unto Rehoboam, king of Yahudah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Yahudah. You know, whenever Yah does something for you, he lets you know he's going to do it for you, and then he manifests it in your life.
Yeah.
Don't you know you don't have anything to worry about?
Right.
Even though you may have enemies in that thing in which he's bestowed upon you. Don't you know that you are still covered by him?
That's right.
That as long as you continue to walk in his will, way, and purpose that he has for your life, there's not nothing that a devil in Hades can do to you.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
There is nothing that can come up against the Most High El. So if he is with you, then who or what can be against you?
Hallelujah.
See, now this is obviously something Jeroboam did not understand, because he began to become fearful, and we know that fear is not of the Ruach HaKodesh, but of the enemy. Amen.
Right. That's right.
He became fearful, and he decided to, you know, put together a plan where this could not happen. You know, again, not considering the wondrous power of the Most High, because if he wanted it to happen, it could have still happened. Amen.
That's right.
You know, so this is what he did, verse 28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel. Now, where did we hear that before? That sounds familiar, right?
Yeah.
Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Mitzrayim. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. And this thing became sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. So you see, they went to worship over in Dan. So you see, for those who were trying to walk in the way of Elohim, Dan truly did become a serpent in the way. He truly did become an adder in the path that was biting the horse's heels, that was causing the riders of those that's trying to go in the way of Elohim to fall backward into idolatry. You know, after Yah had brought them out of bondage and idolatry, here it is, you know, Dan was used to bring them back by this idolatrous calf that was set up in their land. You know, so we see this really did come to pass. And it's also interesting to note that of all the tribes of Israel that's named in New Jerusalem, Dan is absent. It's missing. It's not included. Selah. Let me have my next reader read verses 19 through 21. Concerning blessings of Gad, Asher, and Naphtali.
Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a hind set let loose. He gives God goodly words.
Okay, so here it is. We have Gad, whose name speaks to a troop. You know, and it says a troop shall overcome him. So a troop shall overcome the troop. You know, but he shall overcome at the last. You know, so short and sweet blessing for Gad. You know, letting them know that, hey, you're gonna get overcome. Trust and know that you're gonna get overcome. Yet, you know, hold on to Yah. See, because we have some Gadites that may be in the room now today. You know, and we have some folks that may get overcome with some situations or circumstances. You know, but when you trust in Yah and you stand on his word, then you can also take refuge in that you shall, even though you may be overcome now, that in the end you shall overcome. You know, and this was the blessing unto Gad. You know, and you know, you may not win every battle. I'm not going to say what you won't do, but you may not win every battle. You may be as Gad. You may be as this troop that's overcome by a troop. You know, but in Yah, you will always overcome at the end. You know, the blessing concerning Asher, you know, it says, Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. You know, that's like just a short, sweet, pretty great blessing, right? You know, Asher, his name means happy, and it sounds like he's going to be happy. You know, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. And even this word fat, you know, it speaks to like the best of the best, you know, the good part. And he shall yield or give royal dainties, you know. And also we have Naphtali. Naphtali, his name means my wrestlings or wrestlings, you know, and it speaks, the prophecy or blessing to Naphtali is that he shall be a hind let loose. He giveth goodly words. You know, now, Naphtali, you know, speaks to being a hind, which is a type of deer, you know, let loose. Now, anytime you let loose a deer, he takes off running, right? You know, and it speaks of him giveth goodly words. Now, within Naphtali, you know, I don't know if you can see this, but if you have eyes to see this, it's kind of beautiful. Because within Naphtali, you can see an evangelist. You can see an evangelist, you know, one who has goodly words that goes out into the world and shares the good news. You know, shares good words, good news. Amen? You know, now, you know, I'm sure we have some folks in here that's like Naphtali, you know, and, you know, when they grab hold of something, you know, that's good from Yah, you know, and they're let loose, they take off like an arrow, if you would, you know, and go around giving that good word that they receive. You know, and that is actually a blessing. That's a great blessing. And I just want you to know that this word yield here in verse 20, as well as the word giver in verse 21, is actually the same word. You know, even though they're translated differently in the King James. You know, it's Nathan, number 5414, meaning to give. You know, so it's speaking of Asher or Asher giving royal dainties. You know, and that's a good position to be in, you know, that you can give unto the king. Amen? Amen. You know, something that he, you know, that he likes, you know, that he considers to be dainty. You know, so also I want you to consider, you know, remember I told you we're going to go back to Zebulun? You know, so I want you to consider Genesis 49, 13 again, Zebulun that dwells. Zebulun name means dwelling or habitation, and we see Zebulun, his blessing was that he will be a haven or a covering of the sea. You know, now the sea speaks to the multitudes, nations, and tongues, the peoples, right? You know, he shall be a covering unto the people. He shall be an haven, a covering of shipmen, and his border shall be unto Zidon. You know, Zidon speaking to a fishery or fisherman. Amen? Amen? Okay, now, when you put Zebulun and Naphtali together, you know, these verses seem to predict the apostles that would eventually come from Zebulun and Naphtali. Kind of speaks to what Yah would do in the last days, even as these prophecies are for the last days. Amen? Amen. You know, so we read in Yeshayahu, that is Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, it says, nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea, beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. And of course, that was speaking of our Messiah, Yahushua, coming unto Zebulun and Naphtali. It says, they that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them have the light shine.
Hallelujah.
You know, also consider Matthew 4, verses 12 through 22. You know, it says, now when Yahushua had heard that Yochanan was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali. Okay? Now that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Yeshayahu or Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, you know, by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people which sat in darkness saw great light. Hallelujah. And to them which sat in the region and the shadow of death, light is sprung up. From that time, Yahushua began to preach and to say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And Yahushua, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. Now remember, their border will be unto Zidon, which meant fishery. Remember that?
Yeah.
You know, and also Zebulun would be a haven unto the ship, a covering for the shipmen. You know, and so here it is. We see him going along the Sea of Galilee, and he saw two brethren, Simon and Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other two brethren, James or Jacob, the son of Zebedee, and Yochanan his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. So you see, he really did go to Zebulun and Naphtali, you know, and he got, you know, this is where he grabbed his ecclesia, many of his ecclesia, these fishermen, even from out of the ships, you know, these shipmen. Can you see that? Okay, I want you to see something else too. You know, even that he chose Zebulun and Naphtali, you know, to come and grab his apostles from, so that they can be the evangelists and that they can be the covering to the fishers, you know, who will go out and fish men. Amen. You know, but something else that I want you to see that's revealed in their names. Zebulun means dwelling, and Naphtali means my wrestlings. So he went to get some men that would become fishers of men, that would dwell in his wrestlings, that would dwell in his strugglings. Can you see that? That will dwell in his struggles, that will dwell in his persecution. You know, see, this is why, you know, we see like in verses like 2 Timothy 3:12, which tells us, yea, and that all that will live godly shall suffer persecution. See, because he came to bring light, you know, to those who are willing to dwell in his wrestlings. Those who are willing to dwell in his persecutions. You know, so that's the people that he chose to use. Verses 22 through 27. My next reader, please.
Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty Elohim of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, even by the Elohim of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings in the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast of the womb. The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Okay, so here we have Joseph, whose name means he will add, or he's adding. And it speaks of him. His blessing is that he will become a fruitful bow. Which is just awesome in knowing that his son, his second son name is Ephraim, which means doubly fruitful. So truly he was a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well whose branches run over the wall. Now what I found interesting, nevertheless, I don't have a problem with this translation, but what I found interesting, nevertheless, is the picture that's being painted, in that the word for bow is actually translated from the word ben, number 1121, which is the Hebrew word for son, and the word for branches is ba, which is the Hebrew word for daughters, and so, I see a little something behind the scenes, a little paintbrush going on behind the scenes there. Verse 23 tells us the archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. And, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty Elohim of Yaakov.
Yes.
From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Now we know that the shepherd, the stone of Israel, did not actually come from the tribe of Joseph, right? But he did come from the archers sorely grieving him and shooting at him and hating him, and his bow did a bow in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty Elohim. Amen. And so we see not in physically, but spiritually, he did come this way. And this is what threw all the Yahudim off, because they was expecting him to come as the Lion of Yahudah, the conquering king, but he came as the suffering servant. Now, this is interesting, as well. It says, even by the Elohim of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty. Now this word Almighty right here is Shaddai. And it's just, I'm not going to get deep off into this, but I spoke on it earlier in Genesis, where we see this word Elohim of thy father. This is actually El, of thy father, and it speaks of El the Father, who shall help thee. And then it says, and by the Almighty. So it sounds like it's redundant, right? But when you consider this word Almighty, number 5414 is Shaddai, which alternate translation could be the breasted one. Then you see the Father, Elohim, and Mother Elohim. The Father and the breasted one. And now check out the blessing that comes from her. Who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above and blessings of the deep that lieth under. And this is likened unto blessings of the breast and of the womb, above and below. The blessings of the breast speaks to sustenance and nurturing and giving you whatever you need when you need it. And the blessings of the womb speaks to your posterity, being plentiful. And it says, the blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. And truly they have. Here it is. Joseph had many children, which was considered a blessing back then, and they still are now today, They shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head that was separate from his brethren, Now, unfortunately, y'all did not give me any revelation concerning Benjamin. It speaks of him being, he shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. You kind of see a connotation with the morning and evening sacrifice. But that's that's reaching. So I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna leave that alone. All right, coming next, read verses 28 through 33, please.
And all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it, that their father spoke unto them, and blessed them, every one according to his blessings he blessed them. And he charged them, and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite. The cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham brought with the field of Ephraim the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there they buried Leah. The purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. And when Joseph had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet in the bed and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people.
Okay, now we went over all this in earlier parts of Genesis, so I'm not going to go over it again. But what I do want to say, I want to say to the men of Elohim, because this is something that has ceased to happen, within the circles of the men of Elohim, and that is where they would actually bless their children, before passing, and this is something a pattern that we see with the men of Elohim, with Abraham, with Yitzhak, with Yaakov, on down through the lineage of the men of Elohim. So if we are going to be men of Elohim, should we not also?
Right.
So I would encourage every man of Elohim to seek Yah in prayer and fasting, to find out, what is the blessing upon your seed that you are to pass on. As we can see, it was a very relevant thing throughout Scripture, and it can be a very relevant thing, in our progeny if we were to practice it. So I'm going to leave you with that. That's all I have for you today. Pray it was a blessing.